So I was watching some Fate, a franchise completely unrelated to traps, and then I remembered I have the superior scientific knowledge on traps, and I can prove objectively that traps aren't gay. Take a look at this graph. This graph is definitive evidence of how traps are not gay. Now, you have to be able to interpret this graph. This graph doesn't make sense unless you are able to interpret it, right? So let's go over the two different tables on this graph. There's subjective arousal and genital arousal, right? What's subjective arousal? Subjective arousal is how much you think you're attracted to something. It's how much you're willing to admit that you're attracted to something. Genital arousal is what your dick says. Genital arousal is how hard your dick gets, right? So here there are categories, right? This is how high is the baseline control genital arousal right here, and how high is the subjective arousal right here. Now the units in the chart aren't really important because they're completely subjective units. What matters is the amount, right? The comparative amount. So what are these categories? What is female, cam, and male? Right? Female, male are obvious, but cam means kynandromorph, right? Kynandromorph. What does kynandromorph mean? Well, it's basically a way to say trans woman, right? So trans woman, right? So female, trans woman, male. What's camp? Homosexual, heterosexual men, obvious, right? Homosexual men like men, heterosexual men like women. What's camp? Well, camps like camps, they're kynandromorphiles. So they like kynandromorphs. So these are basically men who are attracted to trans women, right? So in the subjective arousal chart, you can see that men who are attracted to trans women do not consider themselves to be gay and that, like gay in any like real sense, right? They're equally attracted to men and trans women with a slight attraction to males over like normal heterosexual men, right? There's a slight gap, but this gap is nowhere close to the gap between camps and homosexuals, right? So homosexuals, gay men, right, don't like women, like trans women slightly more, but not by a notable amount. It's basically the same difference that like heterosexual men like men, right, compared to trans women, right? So neither homosexual nor heterosexual men are big fans of trans women. This, in general, this is not like a massive subjectively arousing thing, right? However, when I compare it to men who are into trans women, the men who are into trans women tend to be way more heterosexual, right? So there's no difference in attraction to trans women between homosexual and heterosexual men, and the only people who are consistently attracted to trans women do not categorize themselves as being homosexual and because they are not attracted to men, right? So then we get into genital arousal. Now this chart is slightly different, but this is only for like one real significant reason. All the other ratios are the same, except camps get more aroused by trans women than either women or men. However, it still proves that they are not just lying here, right? They are still not homosexual. So being camp is not being gay, right? So if, for example, you watch Fate, right, and go like, Astolfo is not a trans woman, right? However, Astolfo has the characteristics of a gynandromorph, right? Astolfo looks like a girl despite having a penis. That's a gynandromorph, right? So Astolfo, a trap, right? If you're attracted to Astolfo, it means you're camp, which means you're not gay, because this is the barrier between camps and homosexuals. There is no barrier between camps and heterosexuals. You are straight. If you like traps, you're not gay, you're camp, which is closer to being straight than it is to being gay. Thanks for coming to my lecture. Thanks for listening to me objectively prove that traps are not gay. This has been Science Hour with Toad Smite. Thank you for coming. Thank me later.